Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night. It's raining in Florida. I'm glad because I put centipede seeds in the lawn. I've been having to do the sprinkler, so bring the rain in. As long as the rain doesn't mess with my internet, I'm happy. But you're listening to 107.7 New Orleans and 105.3 Henderson Point, Mississippi. Tonight's show is brought to you by Jim Oliver's Smokehouse, Restaurant and Lodge in Monteagle, Tennessee. Order online at www.thesmokehouse.com. Offering a large variety of all-natural, old-fashioned jams, jellies, barbecue sauces, and smoked country meats. That's www.thesmokehouse.com. Promo code is live on the site. Enter UPRN to save 10% off your online purchase. All righty. About to watch the new Daredevil this weekend. I'm loading up. Daredevil versus Punisher. I'm there. Give me my ultra-violence, baby. It just came to Netflix today, so I'm more excited for that than any of the other trashy superhero movies coming out because I love Daredevil. That first season was amazing. So looking forward to that. And the guy that plays, who played Shane in Walking Dead is Punisher, so I can't remember his name, but he was in that Fury Tank movie with Brad Pitt about World War II. And Nazis. We were just talking to Joe. He was trying to politic me. He's talking about a conservative coming to the White House. Who are you talking about? Well, Donald Trump's not a conservative. You're talking about Ted Cruz. Please don't let Norman Bates come to the White House. My God. No way. That's terrifying. But nonetheless, let's not get into politics right now. I'm a Bernie supporter, and that's all I'm going to say. So we'll get to our guests. We got Jay with us. You still here, Jay?
I am still here.
Making sure. What is he talking about? Talking about Joe in the room. Cops said that all these Native Americans in New Jersey support Trump. I don't really get that.
Yeah, he's weak.
That's weird. Like, if I was a Native American, which I have a Cherokee in my blood, I sure would not support Trump. That's for sure. But that's just bizarre. I don't understand it. But apparently they are. Oh, there's this weird thing, Hindus for Trump, and they were saying he's Lord Vishnu. I don't get that either. But,
he doesn't look you.
Yeah. But just high weird. I'm just going to stick with the Wizard Bernie, and there we go, Gandalf the Wizard against the tyranny of evil. But nonetheless, let's get to our guest, Peter Baldwin Panagore. Am I saying your last name right, Peter? Because I've been trying to say it earlier to myself. I'm like, am I saying that right? Panagore.
You are.
Panagore. Where's that from?
It's a made-up American name from the Greek Panagaris.
Cool.
Yeah.
And his book is Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning. All right. Well, it's good to have you here. First off, the show's a couple of hours. How long do you got? Can you do more than an hour, or need just an hour? Or?
I got 2 hours. If you want 2 hours, I got 2 hours.
Okay, well, what it
or
is
an hour.
We do an hour, we take an 8-minute break, and then we'll do the rest of it. It goes by faster than you think. It's pretty quick. It's like, boom. And plus, we start a little late, which I don't care about that, really. It's no big deal, so it's not full 2 hours. But nonetheless, well, I've had a lot of people on about the afterlife, and I love hearing different perceptions of it, everybody's different perspective of it. And in my early 20s, my dad passed away, and just last year, my stepdad passed away. I had a lot of death in my family. All my grandparents are dead, friends. I could go on and on and on. So I'm always interested in learning, new information. It kind of helps me. It's kind of therapeutic on some level because I'm a person that thinks about death a little too much, I think. My death, not other people's, but mine. It's kind of like that appointment that's always there that you know is going to be there. Because I kind of have OCD, so I'm like, well, some days I'm just like, well, let's just get it over with so we can do it, you know. It's coming, so just do it. So it's something I think about a lot. I've gotten better with it. But, and I guess part of that, when I was 17, I had testicular cancer. I'm 41 now, and I've been healed since then. And, well, shortly after that, a year or so later, my dad died, and I started seeking the spiritual heavily. I'm from Georgia, so I grew up in Christianity. But I started reading the Bible from front to back and a lot of other stuff, Buddhism, shamanism, you name it. And shortly after that, I had a lot of experiences. You know, my dog is acting weird. Get out of here. What are you sniffing for? Go. And anyway, I had a lot of weird stuff happen to me. I saw beings of light, people made out of light. I've had a lot of weird UFO stuff happen with multiple witnesses, and I attract this kind of stuff to me. And I believe it was from me being healed from cancer. I believe that was a shamanic death of sorts. And to this day, just a few years ago, I was feeling kind of depressed, and I put on this DVD audio Bible and put it on the TV and played it real loud. I was like trying to fumigate the house in case there was anything creepy in here, pretty much. And something goes, go outside, and you know, so I did. And I looked up, and right over my house are two people of light leaving my house, like they flew out of my roof, and they're flying to the heavens. So for some reason, I believe it had something to do with the testicular cancer and going through all that, and who knows what else, but I've seen a lot of weird stuff, so I definitely know there's much more. From all the guests I've interviewed and stuff, I know there's quantum realms all around us. There's all kinds of crazy multidimensional stuff going on. But death, I guess my biggest problem with it is I just don't, the idea of it, I don't like it. You know, you build up all your stuff here, and you lose everything. You don't see who you love anymore. My dog's older. He has seizures. My dog, Jack, I'm always worried. I mean, sooner or later, you know, he's going to croak, and I'm just always thinking about it a little too much. So I'm just curious, how did your journey begin to where you were faced with death, and if you want to begin your story? Well, first tell us a little bit about yourself, and then you can start your story.
Sure. I was 20 years old. I've gone out to Montana to basically escape my family for a year as a junior in college. I went on exchange, went to Montana for the mountains and was skiing, and joined a theater company when I was there. But come March, I didn't want to go back to Boston. I wanted to go do something adventurous, so I went to the outdoor club where I had been a member and a participant and a leader, and looked for something to do, and there was a fellow named Tim who had put up a flyer on the wall outside looking for a partner to go do a 10-day snow caving trip with one-day ice climbing in Alberta, Canada, and British Columbia. And got a little cold. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And so Tim and I, we met, and we got along. We both checked out each other's experience. Tim was a lead ice climber and technical climber. I'd done a lot of technical climbing and had done a lot of backpacking and winter camping my whole life. I was a Boy Scout, winter camping every month through the winter, and right through when I was 18, because I stayed as an Explorer Scout on the down low so my friends wouldn't find out, because it was not cool. So I backpacked a lot, and I went on this trip with Tim. We did 10 days altogether and 8 days snow caving back in a place called the Assiniboine Provincial Park, skiing out with, I think my pack was 70 pounds, and digging out snow caves and living in the snow cave and continuing on skiing and that kind of stuff. And so we came back for our one-day ice climb, and I'd never been ice climbing before. And like I said, Tim was a lead climber. We spent the night before our climb at this world-famous climb called Lower Weeping Wall. People from all over the world come in to climb this particular wall. We spent the night with a ranger. We traded making him dinner for a bed. The next morning we get up, signed into the wilderness log, went down to the climb, it wasn't very far off the highway, and there's a parking lot across the street, middle of nowhere, south of Jasper, north of Banff, kind of northwest of Banff. And I made a bravado choice in terms of my equipment. I couldn't come up with 2 ice axes. I borrowed most of the equipment that I had, and I couldn't find a second ice axe. So I talked Tim into letting me climb with an ice hammer in one hand and an axe in the other. And the hammer is not an efficient climbing tool. It is too short. You can't dangle from it like you can from an axe, and so you can't ever rest. And so that choice slowed our climb down significantly. And by the time we reached the top, at sunset, all the other teams were leaving. It was a day climb, about 500 feet. And we sat up on this ledge as we watched all the other teams leave down below us, and we knew we were in serious, serious trouble. We were wet to the skin. We had eaten all our food, drunk all our water, didn't have a stove with us, didn't have a sleeping bag with us. We were already shivering, and Tim hauled up the rope, and the sun went down, and the moon didn't rise for several hours, so it was pretty dark out, but light enough with the starlight that you could kind of see in black and white. Tim hauled up the rope, and the rope got tied into a 300-foot knot because he kind of hauled it up too fast. And we had to sit there for quite a while I untangled the rope, and we ended up getting the beginnings of hypothermia, and that lasted right through the night and only worsened as it went on. When our jaws started to clatter uncontrollably and preventing us from speaking, we discussed, even with our clattering jaws, spending the night right where we were, huddled up and canoodling up against the mountain for some kind of warmth, but decided that we were going to die if we did that because the temperature had dropped about 20 degrees and we were really, really cold. Starting to get frostbite because I had to take off my gloves to untangle the rope. And we knew that if we stayed there, we were going to die. And so I should add that I'd been on the National Ski Patrol since I was a sophomore in high school and done first aid and Boy Scouts my whole life. And so as a ski patrol person, I'd pulled off a bunch of people off the mountain with hypothermia and frostbite. I was pretty familiar with all the stages of it and how it went and what to look for. And so we roped ourselves together in the dark and traversed over to our first rappel. And we had also decided not to talk at all unless it was absolutely necessary, because every step of the way drained our energy. I was a very trim young fella back then. I didn't have any excess fat to consume. And after a while, of course, my body started to consume itself because I kept driving it on and on and on throughout the night. But we get to our first rappel, and the moon had come up around that time, about a three-quarter moon, so we could see better. And we made a bad choice, partly because hypothermia was beginning to affect our thinking, partly because we were cheap college students and didn't want to lose a piece of equipment on the mountain. We had to put a piece of webbing, which was tied in a square knot like a loop, around a tree, and then run the rope through the loop and drop the rope down so that when you pull the rope, when you're down below, it doesn't get stuck on the tree. But we didn't want to lose the webbing, so we wrapped the rope right around this little tree. And we descended, and it was a descent where a good part of the way down we were free falling, essentially. There was we were rappelling an open space. There was no way to touch the mountain because it was an overhang. And so we got down to the bottom of this thing, and on an area maybe like 16 by 16 or so, and the rope got stuck because it froze to the tree. And want me to continue with all these details, or want me to cut to the chase?
No, you're good. Like we said, we got about 2 hours. So what mountain was it?
This is a place called Lower Weeping Wall, which is northwest of Banff, right on the Alberta, British Columbia border.
Okay.
On the Ice Palisades Highway.
Okay. Yeah, definitely continue.
So we were in about 2 feet of snow up to our knees, and the rope was stuck up above us, and it was 150 feet up. Well, maybe 140 feet. And we pulled both our weight on one end of the rope. It's a 300-foot rope wrapped around this tree, and the rope wouldn't come free with all our weight on it. And we started losing our ability to speak. We'd gone beyond the clattering jaw and gone into the muscles in our faces, and our feet and our bodies becoming lethargic and thick. Lost our coordination. We're losing the ability to think clearly, and we couldn't get the rope loose. So Tim knew this knot called a Persic hitch, and it's a friction hitch, and you use a very thin piece of line, and you tie it onto the rope, and you make this long loop that goes all the way down to your foot. And when you put your foot in the loop, and when the rope is taut, you can pull up on the hitch with your hand and raise your foot, and when you push down with your foot, the friction prevents the hitch from slipping. So it's an ascender's hitch. So Tim, who felt responsible as the lead climber, decided to reascend up this overhang without any protection, so that because we were going to die, and either he went up and he got the rope free, or we were going to die, or he went up and he got the rope free, or on the way up he was going to die. It was all these options of death in front of us. And I took the end of the rope and I wrapped it around my waist, and I laid down in the snow beneath it and rolled up as tightly as I could to make the rope as taut as possible on his ascent. And he began the climb back up the rope without protection. And he got about 20 feet up or so, and his motion freed the rope, and he fell. And half landed on me. I tried to roll out of the way, but he half landed on me and half in the snow, and he wasn't hurt, but we'll get the rope free. And about this time, as we were hauling down the rope, a vehicle came down the highway, and it pulled into the parking lot across the street, and it flashed its lights at us. We figured out it was the ranger, because we hadn't signed out of the log. So everybody else had signed in and signed out. We'd only signed in, and he came looking for us. And so he flashed his lights, and we waved our arms, and we were heartened, and we continued on our descent, driving ourselves with willpower against the cold, and my feet were like blocks of ice. When I say they were like blocks of ice, I don't mean that they were just cold. I mean that they were immovable, frozen on the inside of my boots. I couldn't bend my feet. And we stomped our way over to the next rappel, tied ourselves together, and stomped our way over and made the next rappel down off of the ice on rock in a shadowy area where the moon had passed across the sky and was casting a shadow in this place. It was full of rocks and boulders and crags. Couldn't really see what we were doing. And we got down to the last rappel, and that was around a corner on a ledge about, it might have been a foot or 16 inches. So if I'm standing on this ledge, my nose is just about touching the sheer vertical rise of the granite right in front of me. There's an iron pin in the mountain with a ring on it that I clipped myself into, and Tim did the same, and he was to my left, and I was to the right, and the rope was to the right. And when we did that, the ranger flashed his lights and left, because we only had one rappel left. I took the end of the rope, the bitter end of the rope, and I tied it to my harness, and I dropped the other bitter end, and I began to pull the rope through the eye ring, which is at the top of the previous rappel, and the rope jammed around the corner in the dark, irretrievable from me on the first pull. And nothing I could do could get that rope loose. And Tim and I discussed me untying the rope and handing him the bitter end to my left, and us pulling on it together, but the rope was so short that if I untied it and he missed grabbing it because our hands were frozen, or I untied it and I dropped it, if he dropped it or I dropped it, we were going to die for sure. So we decided that the smart thing to do is to leave it tied to me, and that I had responsibility to try to get it loose. Only I couldn't get it loose. And a lot of time passed, hours passed as we were stuck there, and we got colder and colder and colder, and I realized that I began to get hot. And I got hot, and I unzipped my coat, and that's a couple steps away from death. And And we were stuck. I began to understand that I was not going to get out of this situation, and that it was a beautiful place to die. And as I began to get really tired, I accepted that this was it. And so I started thinking about my parents, who I had left behind in Boston because I'd had a sister who had vanished when I was 14. She'd run away, but from what we saw, she just vanished. And we were pretty broken up by it. My mom was a wreck, and I started thinking about my parents and them losing 2 kids and how difficult that was going to be for them, but there was nothing I could do about it. And I became calm about my death because there was nothing I could do about it. And I began to fall asleep, and meanwhile, Tim next to me was going through something similar, but my world had reduced down to me, and I wasn't really paying attention to him anymore. And I began to fall asleep, and I'd fall off my little perch there. It was about a foot or 16 inches wide where I was standing, and because I had a harness on, I didn't fall very far. I'd smack into the mountain, and that would wake me up, and I'd pull myself back up again and pull on the rope and fall asleep, and repeated that process some number of times. I lost track, and then I pulled myself up this one time, and I remember standing there, and as soon as I stood up there on this little tiny ledge, I watched the world fade to black like an old-time movie, down to zero, down to a hole right in front of me. My peripheral vision darkened in a circle, and I watched it close in, and I remember thinking to myself, what am I watching? What is this thing? How come this is happening? And then it all went black, and I felt myself fall, but I didn't feel myself hit the mountain, and I didn't fall asleep, and I thought to myself, why am I still awake? And as I thought that, knowing that my eyes were closed, suddenly in front of me I could see where the mountain should have been, a vast expanse. And in this vast expanse, filling my entire inner vision, was some sort of gray, dark, amorphous cloud that covered as far as I could see, up, down, left, and right, and it rushed toward me, and it communicated to me that it was taking me, and that I put up all my willpower that I had developed through the night, all the strength that I had left, against it taking me, and it took me anyway, plucked me like a stick in a raging river, and I had no resistance to it, but it communicated to me that it was going to take me.
What was it again, like a cloud?
It's really difficult to explain those things that are not things. So anything that I say, like it's a cloud or it had intent and being, those words don't really match.
Sounds like a UFO, dude.
Well, it wasn't. It was death.
I'm just.
It's okay. Well, we could talk UFO too, but that's a whole other tale.
That'd be good, yeah.
So, and that happened long before this. So, anyway, I was taken, and the next thing I knew, I was in this place. There was no place, there was no time, and no space, and it was infinitely dark and illuminated at the same time, and it was infinite space. It was like this greater darkness in which I could see, but I had no eyes because I had no body, and I had no brain and no flesh and bone. I was a being of consciousness. But everything that I say about it, I was no thing. So it's hard for me, like all near-death people who've gone over as far as I have, it's the place of no thing and no time.
So would you consider that a being of light, possibly?
No, it was my soul. It was me.
But is that made out of light, you think?
Light that's not made of photons.
Because, I mean, that's in the Bible. Doesn't it talk about bodies of light and all that? And a lot of
it does, but those are symbolic words.
Okay.
And maybe here they have a little more physicality, but there's no physicality. There's non-being. There's no thing. Everything here in this world is a thing. Everything. Quarks, muons, star clusters, galaxies, shells on the beach, they're all things. But over there are no things. Nothing is a thing. There's no thing. And there's no time and there's no space. and there's no way to conceive it with my mind or communicate it.
That's what I've always wondered. If you don't have, I mean, when you are in this the form, like you said, you don't have eyes or brain. How does that work? That's just hard to comprehend for us on many levels.
I know. I would imagine me when I was there, trying to figure out what had happened. I could tell you a few things. I could think more clearly than I'd ever been able to think before or since. I had no brain in the way of my thinking, and there was unlimited information, knowledge to me, not infinite, but seemingly unlimited. So I'm there, and I can see in every direction, but I have no eyes. And in front of me, suddenly there's this gigantic door, or portal, or gate, and it's 100 yards tall and 70 yards wide, say, and I can see a darker tunnel inside of this thing, and in front of this gate is a shimmer, and this shimmer is transparent and translucent at the same time, and I touch it with my being, and when I touch it with my being, I feel living life energy in it, chi, prana, whatever you want to call it. It had life force to it, and when I touched it with my being, I heard my name called from outside of me, but I heard the voice inside of me call my soul name, my true name, the name that created me. And in the moment of the calling of my name, I knew that I'd been created, and I was infilled with love and beauty and hope and truth and joy, and it was all wrapped up into one thing. And at the same time, I was infilled with the knowledge that I was completely known, and there was nothing about me that had ever not been known. Everything about me had always been known. And in the knowing of myself, I went through a life review of all the people that I'd hurt in my entire life from the moment of my birth, and I experienced all of their pain that I had given to them, the pain that I intended to give them, and the pain that I didn't know that I had given them, and I felt all of their pain. And juxtaposed to that was all of my experience of giving them that pain for justification reasons, for just ill-intent reasons. I felt shame for everything that I'd ever done. And meanwhile, while I was in this self-judgment hell, and it was very painful, the voice that had no gender and no sound and no language was saying inside me, I love you, I made you, I created you, I know you. There's nothing about you that I've not ever known. Everything about you is known, and I love you anyway for who you are and how I made you. I love you as you are. I forgive you. And I was forgiven for all of the pain that I'd caused in my life. And back infilled with all this beauty and this love and truth and hope and joy, and all wrapped into one thing, an infinite amount. Like the greatest love you've ever felt in your life is as a speck of dust in the cosmos, and the cosmos is the amount of love that could be possibly infilled into the soul in the divine presence. It's immense. It's infinite. It's incredible and beautiful. And I said, "Am I dead?" And the voice said to me, "Yes, you're dead." And I knew that it was God, and I knew that God was next to me, but I couldn't see God. And the voice wasn't male, and it wasn't female. And I said, "Well, I can't die now." And the voice said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I can't take another child from my parents." And God swept me over and showed me Earth, and I could see every single individuated human being on Earth all at once, and I could see all of them covered in a veil of blindness. And the voice said to me, and showed me my parents in particular, and I could see their suffering. They're live, like a remote. And the voice said to me, "In the way that I love you now know that I've always loved you, and that my love, because of my love, all has been well with you, all will be well with you, and all is well with you because of my love, and you know this now." And I knew it like I can't tell you how much. And I knew also that not a single person on earth could see that love. But I also knew that in death, God said, that all would be well with my parents, and that though they would suffer in this life if I stayed dead, they would also be blessed with wellness when they died. and all would be well for them. And that wellness it's unbelievable. And I said, well, I have this other reason why I can't go. I'm in this theater company, and we're going on this national tour. It's a big thing, and we've been in rehearsal for a year. It's all over the United States. A lot of money's been spent, and there's no understudies. And I promised that I would come back for it from this trip unhurt. And I said, can I go back? And God said, yes, you can go back. And I also, I'm going to interject and say, I also knew that the length of my life in time was the wink of an eye. That timelessness is reality. And that my life on earth was an illusion. And I said, if I go back, can I come back here? Meaning this inner bliss, this love and joy and truth that was radiating and living inside me, emanating from the divine, who is love, and more than that, beyond my comprehension. And God said, yes, you can come back here if you go back. And I said, well, then I choose to live my life. And God said, you won't live your life. And the next thing I knew, I was being screwed back into my body again, and I was dangling on my harness, and I didn't know where I was or what was happening or what I was. I didn't understand what a body was, or flesh, or bone, or brain. And it took me quite a while to swim to the surface of understanding of being a human being. And as I swam up, I heard screaming and yelling, and I swam up to the surface, and it was Tim screaming at me, you were dead. I thought you were dead. You were dead. If you die, I'll die. And he helped me back up again. And he was talking to me for some period of time. I don't really know what he was saying as I tried to figure out what I was and where I was and what had happened to me. And at some point he told me to pull the rope, and I pulled the rope, and it came free. And we descended and treated ourselves for hypothermia in the tent for a little bit. But sun came up right away, and we decided that the warmest place for us would be inside the car with the heater on. And that's where I'd like to end it for a moment.
So you were stuck on the mountain, and how did you get off again? You just had that?
The rope came after I came back from death. The rope came. I pulled the rope, and it came loose on the first pull, and we rappelled down like we would have rappelled anyway.
So it's kind of like you got help, maybe some kind of intervention, or with it, or something.
Some kind of miracle like that. All I know is that it was astounding to us.
Well, you're giving me goosebumps when you're talking about God talking to you and stuff. I put some goosebumps up my spine. That usually lets me know that the truth for sure. Well, Jay, let's let the other co-hosts here ask a few questions. Jay, you there?
Yeah, I was reading the chapter, and you kind of just spoke about a little bit that you felt like an alien in your body. That you were just disoriented from not having been in it?
No, well, that was the start of it. I'm still an alien in my body. I never really fully came back, because most of me is still on the other side. And I live my life in what feels like two places at once, always, inescapably so. So much so that it's my whole life is this now. From that moment on, my whole future, I had no future, and when I came back, my future was entirely different. And my life has been in pursuit of that which I can't have, the thing that attracts me and repels me at the same time. And I'm an alien here. But I'm not unusual in that. Most near-death people, if not all who've gone as far up as I went, have a similar experience. It's like a form of non-attachment, of turning away from the world, of different orientation. And it's not like I chose it because I chose to come back, but I didn't know what the result would be.
And you didn't know what you were choosing, and you even mentioned in your book that you feel like you have 1 foot here and 1 foot over there. But when you went, there was like a lot of near-death experiences. They almost all of them describe like a tunnel and light. The light that is almost so blinding that they can't see it. but they know it's there. So you didn't have that experience. You didn't like travel through a tunnel. You were just
I didn't.
You know,
I got pulled, and maybe it was a tunnel. I don't know. I just got pulled into this other place, and I didn't see light. I have subsequently seen the light and other and more unitive experiences as a result of this. But at that time, all I saw was love and beauty.
Yeah, and you mentioned that as well. And other experiencers of near-death experiences like this also mention when they do come back, whether they're pushed back or they choose to come back, they describe like a silver line that followed them from their body to where their soul went. And you didn't experience that either. You were put back by a third party.
I was put back by God. I know what you're talking about with the silver line. That's fairly common in astral projection, and I'm familiar with that, but that's not what happened to me then. And I'll also add that I wrote this book without reading any other near-death experience books because I wanted it to stand or fall in the near-death community on its own.
Right. Well, from what I read of it, you write really well, so it's a good job. It's a good book.
Thanks.
Now, you also, in your college, after this experience, you went on to get a master's in divinity from Yale?
I did. I was supposed to go into the family architecture business and go to graduate school in architecture, and actually got accepted at Georgia Tech. But I couldn't do that. I had to pursue this, and so I began, when I was in high school, I went to a Catholic high school, and my senior year of high school, I had the great blessing of my senior year religion teacher going off to St. Joseph's Abbey, which is a Trappist monastery outside of Worcester, Mass., where they'd been studying with Sasaki Roshi, a Zen master, who had taught them the practice of centering prayer, or enhanced their practice of prayer, I should say. And my religion teacher came back and taught us meditation my senior year of high school, and I became an instant devotee. I'm still a meditator. And I mention that because the monastery. And so I started frequenting the monastery after this, because those were the people who understood some kind of mystical union. And I decided to go to the monastery to be a monk, but I'd been talking to them about it, but I couldn't live without sex, or at least I thought I couldn't, and so I decided to get a degree in Protestantism because I didn't have any exposure to it. And Yale, so I applied to Yale, Harvard, and Princeton, and I got into Princeton and Yale. And when I matriculated at Yale with the dean of students, I told her my interest was in the history of Western Christian mysticism. And although Yale didn't teach that, she allowed me independent studies, and that became my major, so to speak. And so because Yale doesn't teach that. But there were a few classes downtown, and she let me do independent studies, and we ran a class up at the Divinity School, and so I spent most of my time studying mysticism in order to figure out a language to think about what had happened to me, and to find out if there were other people in history like me. And yeah, there are. Yeah, there are. And
in your studies, I know you in your biography you mentioned that you follow a kind of a Catholic curriculum. Did you study the Anunnaki at all?
I'm familiar with the name, and I did not study that particular book. No, I landed more in the realm of Jacob Boehme, Meister Eckhart, Julian of Norwich, Luis de Leon, and a whole series of people, but not that particular book.
The reason I ask is a lot of people who have studied them think that although history records them as gods, the actual story seems more like they're regular flesh and blood creatures like us that just happen to come to this planet and allegedly have created the human race to do their tasks, their hard work.
Now that you're talking about it, I have heard about that.
Okay.
That's familiar to me. I don't make any sort of. I'm basically, as a person, a rational empiricist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very deep into science. I'm an amateur. Okay, let me just say that up front. I'm not a mathematician, but I I try not to speculate on what I might believe and what I don't believe, because one of the things that happened to me is I came back without belief. I am not, and this is the hardest thing. So I became a congregational United Church of Christ minister for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And now I work in television as a minister, but I still work in television. But I when I died, God took away my belief and replaced it with knowing that I'm known. That's the best way that I can describe it. So I'm not a person who, I don't speculate on belief because I don't believe. For me, for lots of people like me, God is real. Not
mm-hmm.
speculatively real, but more real than the table and the floor, the floor I'm standing on, and the table that my
another day, and I'm
things
still.
To me are temporary illusions that I know are going to pass away when I leave this world. Now the world may continue for another 75 billion years, or the universe might, but my world won't. My world, I get to go back home again when this body. Mm-hmm. By the way, I had a heart attack in August and had my first chance to go home. And another result of this is I prayed for my death every day because I feel like I made the biggest mistake coming back here. And first chance I got to go back in August, I chose to stay for love for my kids because they need me here. And death came to visit me again, but this time invited me, but didn't threaten to take me, just invited me.
So the reason I asked about that is when you were on the other side, did you get a sense that the God being you were talking to, was it a physical being, or is it just strictly an energy?
It's not even energy. Energy gives it beingness. It's not being. Anything that I say about, if I say, I like to talk about it this way. Jesus is walking one day, and some guy comes up to him and he says, "Good teacher," and Jesus says, "Only God is good." Anything that I say about, strictly speaking, anything that I say about God denies that word here on earth. If I say God is good, if I say my tea is good, well, then they both can't be good, because God's goodness is beyond language, and God's being has no being. It has nothing. There was nothing about it that I could comprehend, but I could experience the love and the forgiveness. God was so infinite beyond my capacity for understanding. To even call it a being is to even talk about it. So I kept this a secret for 20 years as I tried to figure out language to speak about it in. But the language itself is symbolic language and not the thing itself. It can't be. And so I struggled a long time trying to figure out whether I should even talk about it, because I can't talk about it. Because everything I say about it is not the thing itself.
The biblical word for God, which is Yahweh and or translated I am that I am, is even that is inaccurate as a descriptor?
Well, the word Yahweh that's translated in English with vowels in the Hebrew has no vowels. It's unpronounceable. Mm-hmm. It's the only word in the Bible that is unpronounceable. And I think that's a recognition of the non-beingness of God, because in Genesis, according to the story, human beings were given the capacity to name all things. We're naming all things. We're still naming things. We're naming, like I mentioned, muons and quarks. We're still naming these minute things and these large things, but only God can't have a name, because God's name is unpronounceable, because God is not being like we are. And
interesting.
And also, I should say, I'm not trying to convince anybody either. I'm not an evangelicist. I'm not evangelical. I'm not interested in trying to talk anybody into.
What's your denomination?
United Church of Christ.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that really.
Yeah, they were kind of they were the Pilgrims and the Puritans in early New England who metamorphosized into the Congregationalists, who then became. Pardon me?
What are they called again? Church of Christ?
United Church of Christ.
United Church of Christ. Okay.
And that's a different denomination than Church of Christ.
And two of my friends from high school are reverends in that church.
Yeah, it's the Church of Christ is a little more literalist than the United Church of Christ. But I'm sort of like I've always considered myself a mole. I'm a mystic. I'm not a theologian. I'm a mystic, and a near-death experiencer, and the theological categories which are used to explain the essence of the divine, they're too limited for me.
Now, I have a question about the travel. What you mentioned you weren't able to discern or perceive time on the other side. Were you able to discern distance? I mean, did you feel that you traveled a distance from your body?
No, there's no space. There's no time and no space.
And also, I had another question, and it just left my brain. When you hit 50, you start losing things. You also mentioned you weren't sure in the book how long you had been under or been away or to the other side. Have you since then found out from Tim how long you were unconscious and or dead?
Nope. Tim and I parted in a hard way, and I haven't ever seen him since. And it was only days later. I don't want to give away because let me say this: that the day after this happened, as bad as that day was, the next day was worse for Tim, especially. And it was my fault. And we, within days, parted ways. I went on this national theater tour, and he stayed at the university. And when I came back from this tour, I got my gear back from him, and it was like 8 weeks later or 10 weeks later, and we parted with a handshake. But I never talked to him again, and I never saw him again. And no, I don't know the answer to the question.
So you don't even know if he had a similar experience because you both were unconscious?
No, I know he didn't die. I know he didn't.
Okay.
I know he didn't because because he saw me die. And we did talk a little bit about that.
Was the parting because of your afterlife weird stuff that happened, or just something else?
I'm sorry, Jay, what did you say?
I said, was the parting of the friendship because of your afterlife experience?
No, he was an atheist, and I decided there's no way I could talk to him about it. We'd already talked that we would not talk religion at all. I was a charismatic Catholic Christian at the time with a smattering of Zen Buddhist practice, and he didn't want to talk religion, so we never talked religion. I was never going to tell him what had happened to me. First of all, I had no idea what had happened to me. This was 1980, and I was living in Montana. There was no internet. I'd never even heard of near-death experience. I didn't even get a name for that until I was at Yale. That's when I was like, near-death experience, that's what it's called. And that happened because my wife was she was an epidemiologist in the medical school, and she somehow came across this book by Raymond Moody, Life After Life, and brought it home one day. And
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Hey, we got to go on break. The producers coming for. So we'll be back in about 8 minutes. Everybody, you're listening to the Church of Mabus radio show, and Peter Panagor's book is Heaven is Beautiful: How Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning, by Hampton Road. And make sure you check out redwillwiser.com. That's a publisher, and they have a lot of great unique titles. We have many of their authors on. We'll be back very shortly. All right, Peter, just don't hang up, and we got about 8 minutes.
I'll stay right here.
Struggling with my diabetes.
This is Jeffery Pritchett of the Church of Mabus radio show. Starting in March, we'll be going to a new time slot of Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern to 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm very happy to be going to this earlier time slot. I'll be more happier, so watch out, mother truckers. So remember to tune in to me, Beelzebub, and Wham to get your paranormal groove on. Can you dig it? Bringing you original guests, not regurgitating guests. So tune in, drop in, and drop out. Be there or be a dork square. We'll see you on Friday nights. And yeah, this is a Stanford Sun song. Well, that's how we get our groove on, baby.
If you are listening to the show and wish to join us in the chat room, visit paltalk.com. Go to the social issues, select other, and enter the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
You are invited to the Quantum Leap Let Light Unite show every Friday night on United Public Radio Network from 9 to 10 p.m. Pacific Time, 12 to 1 a.m. Eastern Time, with your spiritual warrior goddess, Kathy Bilski. Kathy will share all the old truths the Illuminati tries to keep secret. Kathy also gives you the opportunity to join in with planetary healing light work that will help us manifest World Enlightenment 2016. So let's get high and fly into new possibilities. So join Kathy every Friday night on UPRN, the Quantum Leap Let Light Unite show. A very powerful happening.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we host News on the Flip Side. Come join us every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central for our 3-hour program. We have opinions on everything, and we're not afraid to share them. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can find it here with News on the Flip Side. Remember, don't be politically correct. Just be correct. Join us.
Do you love sports? Okay, maybe just at least pay attention to sports. Then check out the Big Shoulder Sports Show, Tuesday night, 7 to 9 Eastern on UPRNTalkRadio.com and 107.7 FM out of New Orleans. JT, Justin, and I spill our guts about all things Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, Bulls, and Bears with no filter, the way nature intended sports to be heard. We also cover the national news in the sports world, but really, that's just because we have to. The Big Shoulder Sports Show, live Tuesdays 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on UPRNTalkRadio.com and 107.7 FM out of New Orleans. Or check out the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and SoundCloud. 3 guys saying words, making radio happen every week.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
The UPRN family of shows would like to take a moment to thank our loyal listeners for tuning in to UPRNTalkRadio.com along with 107.7 FM New Orleans. Broadcasting on multiple platforms like Live 365, Ustream, and Shoutcast has made the UPRN the longest-running, highly rated, and best source of quality, unique programming that is not afraid of the status quo in alternative media. This station has a solid course of shows and hosts that refuse to get stuck in a rut or be overrun by a groupthink mentality, because station owner, host, and iCar founder Joe Montaldo knows the value of letting his talented stable of hosts grow uninhibited. In this genre, that's an accomplishment which many in alternative radio are striving for, but are left consistently wanting. This is all made possible because of you, the listener, that tunes in live every night, who can tell the difference that independent thinking makes. The best way to show our appreciation is to thank you and continue to allow our listeners the ability to download the archives of all the shows free of charge on iTunes, Podbean, and SoundCloud. No monthly fees, no cost to download individual shows, and none of the constant hassling for donations. That's the UPRNradio.com difference. so stick around. There's much more to come with new shows on the way. For now, feel free to join your favorite show live in the Pal Talk chat room, easily accessible off uprntalkradio.com, and share the experience of listening live with other listeners from around the world. So thanks for listening, and thank you for being a part of the uprntalkradio.com family of listeners.
This is Jeffery Pritchett of the Church of Mabus radio show. Starting in March, we'll be going to a new time slot of Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern to 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm very happy to be going to this earlier time slot. I'll be more happier, so watch out, mother truckers. So remember to tune in to me, Beelzebub, and Wham to get your paranormal groove on. Can you dig it? Bringing you original guests, not regurgitating guests. So tune in, drop in, and drop out. Be there or be a dork square. We'll see you on Friday nights. And yeah, this is a Sanford Son song. Well, that's how we get our groove on, baby.
If you were listening
Fourth World, but really, that's just because we have to. The Big Shoulder Sports Show, live Tuesdays 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on uprntalkradio.com and 107.7 FM out of New Orleans. Or check out the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and SoundCloud. 3 guys saying words, making radio happen every week.
Welcome back to the Church of Mabus radio show. Yeah, we were just discussing with Joe about the Ted Cruz eating a booger video that went around the internet. Anyway, it was from a debate. He accidentally did it, but don't watch the video unless you want to throw up. It's terrible. I'm still psychologically getting over that video. But can you imagine them discussing that during the Ted Cruz with his staff? But anyway, if you haven't seen it yet, Ted Cruz booger debate, don't watch it. But anyway, nonetheless, it is pretty terrible. Well, I can't wait to see Daredevil versus Punisher. That's right, Daredevil versus Punisher. Well, let's get back with Peter and get away from our these other topics. But Joe started it. Joe told me he was going to vote for Hillary just now on break. But no, Peter, you were talking about earlier you had some heart stuff going on. I'm dealing with some health stuff now, and I'm trying to narrow it down. I just bought a glucose meter. I thought I had diabetes. Apparently I don't. I know I have high blood pressure, but I have this thing I do it at home with, and this thing's off. Does so many different numbers. I don't even know if I trust this thing. It's one of the home type deals, but I keep getting all kinds of different numbers. But I'm pretty sure I do have high blood pressure, and my problem is revolving around my heart. But what did you go through with the heart, and you almost died from it?
Yeah, I ran 5K the day before, and I was at yoga class. I was a fit fella, but the sister who had run away, vanished. She, about 7 or 8 years ago, kind of turned back up again. But when she turned 56, my age last year, she was 4 years older than me. She died of a heart attack, a 100% blockage of her widowmaker. And my dad, when he was 56, he had the same thing, and they saved his life on the helipad with a then experimental drug. And so I kind of thought that maybe my number was coming up in last year when I was 56, but I was fine. I was super fit, and so I went to yoga class, and on Saturday morning, and I got really hot, and I thought, wow, I'm sweating a lot. My chest hurts. I better lie down. I lay down. I thought, oh, my God, my heart, it's really hurting a lot. So I got up and I left the class, and I went outside, which was, 15 feet, if that. And I lay down on the grass, and I thought to myself, I'll cool off in the grass. But then my heart started hurting more and more and more, and I said, oh, my gosh, I'm having a heart attack. And I thought, I'll get myself to the urgent care, which was only about a 5-minute drive, but I couldn't get up. And the teacher came out looking for me a minute or so later, and I told her that I was having a heart attack, and we got one of the people in the class who was a friend of mine to drive me to the urgent care because it was quicker than waiting for the ambulance, and I knew that I was in serious trouble. And so I get to the hospital, and or actually it used to be a hospital until about 6 months ago. Now it's urgent care, same facility though. And so the doc was there and a bunch of nurses that I knew because it's a small town, and he gave me a quick look over and gave me an X-ray or a CAT scan. I can't really remember which one it was, probably an X-ray, and said I had 100% blockage in my widowmaker, and that it could shoot me up with a decoagulant so I could get to the hospital, which was an hour and a half away by ambulance. And, it could either kill me or it could give me a debilitating lifelong stroke, or it could unclog my heart a little bit. And I said,
oh, my goodness.
Right, shoot me up. What kind of choice is that? So he shot me up, and it gave me a 95% blockage, so I had 5% trickle through. And they said, we're going to give you some morphine for the pain. I said, no, you're not. I can't take any opiates. I'm really sensitive to them. They make me very sick. And I'm going to be sick on top of having a heart attack. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to meditate through my pain, as I have often used meditation in that way in my life. And so they're loading me up in the ambulance, and as they load me out, my wife comes over and gives me a hug, and my son, who's 23 and happened to be in town last summer working, came over and grabbed my hand and looked me in the eye and said, I love you, Dad. And they put me in the ambulance, and off I went, and meditating the whole way. And it's an hour and a half drive, like I mentioned. It's a long way to the hospital. And you have what's called the golden hour, which I was definitely going to exceed, and I did exceed. And on the way, they had trouble keeping me alive. And the paramedics were talking back and forth, radioing in, we're having trouble with him, and they kept cranking up on I guess it was nitroglycerin. I don't really know what was in the IV. But they kept cranking up on that, and at one point, the paramedic was pretty verbal about her fears that I was going to die in their ambulance. And I opened my eyes and I looked at her, and I think she was surprised that I was awake, because I'd had my eyes shut the whole time, and I looked in her eyes and I could see confidence and fear. And as I drifted back through into my meditation, I saw death inside me, waiting, like inside my space. And it was hovering. It was the same death I saw before, but this time it wasn't rushing toward me. It was hovering above me. And as I looked at it, it came toward me. And I went back in my meditation, and I watched it recede a little bit, but still stay. And I came back up from my meditation, I looked at it again, and I saw it come back toward me again, sort of inviting me. And I went back in my meditation, and I thought to myself, do I want to go? I can go this time. This is my first legitimate chance to die, go home again. And then I saw my son's face, and I heard his words, I love you, Dad. And I started thinking about my daughter and my new granddaughter who had just been born this year. And I realized that I needed to stay if I could stay, because they needed me. And so they got me to the cath lab in Portland, Maine, and as they were hauling me in, the cath doctor, surgeon, said he's not on any pain meds. He's not on any morphine. Let's shoot him up with something. I said, no, I don't want any pain meds. I want you to do this procedure without pain meds, because I'm going to get sick if you give them to me. I'm going to meditate through this. And he said, "All right, you sure?" I said, "Yeah, I'm sure." So they used my right arm artery and rammed me up and reamed me out and gave me a stent. And he told me that I'd had damage in my heart because of the long ride down, and I'd either recover or I wouldn't recover. Either I was going to have permanent damage or it would go away, but there's no way for him to know that it was significant damage. And I got up to the ER, to the ICU, and eventually, they gave me something for the pain about 10 hours later. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't an opioid, something else. And the pain finally went away. So I meditated for like 10 hours on this thing. And come to find out that the doctor back at the urgent care had told my son to say goodbye to me. And that's what he was doing.
Wow.
Yep.
I can understand wanting to leave this planet. I battle with that all the time, of course. Of course, I'm not suicidal, but I can definitely understand wanting to get the heck out of Dodge. I guess, one thing I wanted to ask, what did you do? What changes did you make with your heart? Did you have to change your diet? Did they put you on blood pressure medicine? What were some of those changes that you made?
They put me on I'm on a ton of meds. And now that was in August, and let me say that my doctor, who I saw about a month ago, told me that I had 95% healing of my damage, and that last 5% will be gone in 6 months. So that's gone. Get the big thumbs up for that. And I didn't really have to change a whole lot in my diet. I eat really, really well because of my dad.
Yeah.
I have for a long time. I was a vegetarian for 20 years. I eat some dense protein now, but not very much, and a lot of fruit and vegetables, olive oil. Try to take care of myself. I work hard on my fitness, keep the heart pumping. But yeah, I'm on a whole slew of meds, and one of them I might be able to get off one next August. That would be great.
So why do you think we have to come here? Is it forced? I mean, what have you learned about that from your experiences with the other side? Why do you think we have to come here? I mean, that's what I try to understand. It's so great and beautiful there, and I can believe that. But what is the reason for coming here?
I don't know the answer to that, other than that love is the operative here, and love is the totality there.
It's forced, like it's like natural, like tadpoles incarnating.
Yeah, it's we human beings, we hominins here on this earth, have this misconception that we're important, and that our lives matter, and that we're the most. The Christian tradition teaches that so does Jewish tradition for that matter, that we're the most important thing in the planet, in the world, are human beings, and that's just not true. We're just one planet among the 23 septillion galaxies with 23 septillion star systems, and God knows how many habitable planets, and we're just like everybody else and everything else. There's suffering built into the structure of the existence of this universe, and it isn't just suffering; it's destruction and decay and recreation. I think about a planet and another star system, and there's a species of lizards that have evolved from the dinosaurs because the asteroid missed their planet when it came. The one that hit us missed their planet, and they developed cultures and languages and civilizations. And then one day their planet is consumed by the supernova of their sun. Did they deserve their suffering? No, they didn't. It's just built into the structure. And so the whole cosmos that we live in here has suffering as endemic in it. Buddha said, suffering is the first noble truth. All life is suffering. But heaven has no suffering. If this place had no suffering, it wouldn't be here, it would be heaven. Why it exists, I don't know. That it exists with suffering, I definitely do know. That the suffering ends, absolutely, when we die. And why are we here? Probably to love each other, to experience the ability to love. That's my guess.
So, since you're a Christian, how did your experience shape that, and how did you relate it to that? I've grown up in Christianity all my life. My dad was a Baptist preacher in Georgia. He's passed away. He was abusive, mentally and physically.
I'm sorry.
And it was just rough. And I struggle with Christianity. It's like I can listen or read the Bible, and I do feel peace, and I do believe there's truth within it. But there seems to be always this part of me that's running away from it, that is ashamed of it on some level. And I believe there's Christ, and I call it Christ consciousness, kind of like Nirvana, the Force, or like Dune, when the guy rises with the worm.
Yeah, I'm familiar with all of those images.
Yeah, and I guess my problem with it so much is I lean a lot towards shamanism. We have a lot of medicine men and women on from tribes all over the earth, and it's just their belief system and their spirituality is so positive and beautiful, and it just seems like Christianity just has so much fear and blood and negativity. And another one of my fears is, there's some of these, I guess I'm considered a liberal, I'm Bernie Sanders supporter, and of course I'm really fed up with the Democratic Party too now with the way they've been treating him and everything. But when it comes to the right side, I run screaming away from them. They're terrifying, and I'm not saying they all are, not every one of them, but right now with the way the right is, and I always say, like, a lot of these Republican leadership or right-wing extremists, they'll tell you about Jesus, and it seems like they're peeing on you at the same time when it comes to the poor and veterans and the middle class. Like in the Republican debates, they didn't even mention homeless people, I don't think, or the poor at all. And anyway, to the point, I guess with Christianity, I'm afraid that if I start, if I got into it heavily, the next thing you know, I'm going to turn into like Michelle Bachmann or something.
Well, there are different kinds of Christianity. I mean, just across the world. Genghis Khan, okay? Genghis Khan's mother was a Christian, all the way to the eastern side of Asia, called the Nestorian Christians. They died out as a branch. But there's the Armenian Orthodox, there's the Armenian Catholics, and the Russian Orthodox, and the Coptics, and the Baptists, and there's all these different kinds of Christianity, and they all think each other is heretical. So the Christian right that is in power theologically in our country, they think that they have the answer, but so do the Catholics in Rome, and so does the Patriarch in Constantinople or Istanbul, and the mystics. The mystics of Christianity, like the mystics of Islam and Judaism, and also I would include Hinduism, but it's once you get out of the three monotheists, it becomes a little more complicated to talk about it. But
it's like with a lot of the political figures, not all of them, but some of the extremists, it's like they totally seem like they disregard Jesus' teachings completely, which when it comes to helping the poor and homeless and stuff like that, it's just not even, like at these debates, it's not even in their vocabulary. Like,
no, it's not. It's not. And he talks about feeding the poor and clothing the naked and giving food to the hungry all the time. And there's look at this Pope, this current Pope. The current Pope, who is a liberation theologian from South America, living his life on behalf of the poor, among the poor, feeding the poor, caring for the poor. That's, to me, Christianity. That's the heart of the message of love of Jesus. All the rest of it gets so politicized, it gets solidified and doctrinized, and you get a litmus test of your belief system. And if you're on the outs with that litmus test, then you don't belong. And the way it is now, it becomes dangerous not to be a member of the major theological party, because leave it at that.
And I think some of them use it just to get votes. Like, who knows if they're even really Christians or what they are, but they know how to use it to sway the populace.
Of course. And it's about power and control. Yeah, so that's disheartening, isn't it? Have you ever read A Handmaid's Tale? Have you read A Handmaid's Tale? It's a story about the rise of theocracy, which is a scary thing.
The Handmaid's Tale, that's a movie, right?
And it became a movie, yeah. It's also a book. And
yeah, I ran across that not too long ago, but I actually didn't watch it. I need to watch it. Handmaid's Tale.
It's a terrible dystopian future based in theocratic organization.
And then the thing going on with Trump, like I talked to William Burns a few weeks ago, the guy from the History Channel off UFO Hunters, the guy with the sunglasses and
yeah, I know what you mean.
The hat, and we discussed that. I mean, there really is some weird Hitler stuff going on with this guy. And it's weird because I've said so many right-wing extremists have called Obama the Antichrist and stuff, but it's like I said, it's kind of like the devil sat back and said, here, let me show you what that's really like. Here you go. There was an article in Vanity Fair with Trump and pictures of his bedroom, and on one of his tables was the speeches of Hitler. So, I mean, I think he's bursting himself in the Hitler playbook on some level. There's no doubt about it.
Well, we're in a dangerous time in our country's history, and we reap what we sow. And Jesus talked about reaping what you sow. We're reaping what we sowed.
He's like karmic payback to the establishment of Republicans.
Well,
that part of it's very amusing to me. I'm kind of enjoying that. But yeah, it is scary. It definitely is scary. Seems like it's
all across Europe. There's the same nationalist, anti-immigration, demagoguery, xenophobia arising. It's not just here in our country.
And it's the right? I mean, it's always the right, isn't it?
Well, no, sometimes it's the far left too, but right now it's the far right, I think. Not always.
Definitely. And I mean, the things they're talking about, like he was talking about at the conventions, that people are right if he's not nominated, and it's definitely very entertaining but spooky at the same time. And then at the same time, you got North Korea just shot off 2 ballistic missiles in Japan's direction, testing them with mobile missile launchers. So that's getting pretty frightening too.
Yes, it is. It's a dangerous world we live in. This planet, anyway. You look at Mars. It's pretty peaceful on Mars.
Or yeah, it used to be. Some people think Mars was a civilization that blew up nuclear, and that's why it's the way it is.
Well, we know that we believe that their magnetic field was stripped away and became inhabitable. What caused that, nobody knows yet. But that it had water, we definitely know for sure.
Well, actually, there's an author, Emmanuel Velikovsky. He wrote a book. Several books actually in his Earth Chaos series, and he mentions that maybe because Venus is the only planet in our solar system that rotates clockwise. Everything else rotates counterclockwise.
Yeah.
And he suspects that Venus, the flyby captured, was pushed into the inner planets by Jupiter's gravity, excuse me, and then made 2 flybys through Mars and Earth, and in doing so, it's actually written that the days of darkness in the Bible, or he suspects, are the Venus coming through and blocking out the sun. But he suspects, or theorizes rather, that it pushed Mars into its orbit now, stripping away its water and dumping the rest of its water on Earth and destroying its magnetic sphere. And then on the second pass, darkening the Earth again, and then became the planet Venus and has been in its current orbit since.
I suppose that's plausible.
It's a wacky theory, and to date, it's one of the leading theories. In the 50s, when he wrote the book, everyone thought he was a whack job and just pushed his book aside. But many of the things in his book that weren't true then or weren't proven back then have been since, like how the moon was captured and how the moon became our solar our soul satellite. So he's got some pretty amazing theories. Just they're not all proven yet.
I just put up an article before it's news. Of course, it wasn't my article. It was someone I shared, and I gave credit to the source. But it said the Torah code predicts Nibiru and the return of the Messiah next week. it's based off some study from these Jewish dudes. Of course, I'm not saying I agree with that.
Then run up your credit cards this week. Then go have fun.
Yeah. But the thing that's so wild about it, it's just such a serious article. Like there's a video and everything. There's like some weird. There's codes. Like there's like a breakdown. It's called. Just put in Torah codes Nibiru Messiah. It should come up. But what else? Went blank
ever
there.
Since Paul. Ever since St. Paul.
The UFO stuff you mentioned earlier. What happened with that?
Well, I have a UFO story, and I was the year I graduated high school, 1977. My best friend Steve got a job as a camp counselor in Perrysburg, Ohio, at a Divine Word Catholic camp, and he talked me into going with him. So we both got on a train and we went out to Ohio. And I ended up as the rifle instructor at this camp because I had my Boy Scout merit badge. And so the camp had a car, a Ford LTD, and a bunch of these good Catholic boys, mostly from Boston and New Orleans, got the camp car one night, and we went out to go party. I was 18, and we bought some Stroh's Bohemian 3.2 beer and had a little illegal substance with us, and we pulled into this parking lot, which was a basketball court about 2 miles from the camp above the Maumee River, and we just turned on the music and cracked open a beer, and the parking lot was illuminated. And I was the driver, and I was like, oh, geez, we're busted, boys. It's the cops. And let's just get out of the car and give ourselves up and be good boys about it. And so we all got out of the car, and we looked behind the car, and there was nothing there. And we all looked up overhead at the same time, and covering the entire parking lot was a white disc just above treetop, maybe 20 feet above treetop level, and it was completely silent. And it filled the entire sky above us. And we were like, what is this thing? And it started to drift off slowly away from us, like a balloon drifts very slowly, completely silent. So we all got back in the car. We threw all the stuff out the window because we didn't want to get caught. And we took off after it. And roads are flat and straight in Ohio. And we followed this thing for miles as it flew over the treetops and the cornfields and the soy fields, kind of up in front of us to the left. And I remember looking down at the speedometer, and all the guys were hanging their heads out the window trying to get a good look at this thing. And I remember hitting about 86 on these back roads, straight and flat. And we came to a right angle corner because all the roads turn at right angles out there. And I was doing about 90, and it made a right angle turn without deceleration and no arc. Physics were impossible. And we watched it go off following down this other road, so I slammed in the brakes, and I swung the wheel. We went off the road into the cornfield, knocked down all this corn, made a turn, popped back up on the road, slammed down on the road with the car, and took off after it. And it was waiting for us about a half a mile ahead of us. And when it saw us, it shot off into the sky faster than anything I've ever seen in my life. It was gone in an instant out of the atmosphere. And that's my UFO story. I have no explanation for it, but watching it make that right angle move, it was impossible, and yet it did it.
Well, I firmly believe that there's wild UFO stuff going on, and definitely it's multidimensional. John Keel, pretty much, who knows, intertwined with our reality, whole other possible civilizations for all we know. But John Keel, of course, Richard Gere played him in that movie, The Mothman Prophecies, and I've transcribed a lot of his books. Oh, I know one thing I need to mention real fast. Make sure you stop by Amazon and check out Probes Happen, The Secret Life of Aliens, my new book with Andrew Colvin. And then we got a few minutes left, but I want to get the plugs out of the way. Where's the best place to get your book, Peter?
It's at Amazon. You can visit peterpanagore.com, and that'll give you a bunch of videos and my tour schedule, peterpanagore.com. And also, I work for First Radio Parish Church of America, and that's dailydevotions.org. I produce television 2-minute stories for local broadcast here in Maine and New Hampshire, dailydevotions.org and peterpanagore.com. But the book is also at Amazon. Heaven's Beautiful.
Nice. And I'm going to have to check out that Handmaid's Tale for sure. And I ran across the movie not too long ago, but for some reason I didn't get to watch it. So I'm going to have to check that out. So I'm kind of curious. We got about 10 minutes. Oh, yeah, about 10, 11 minutes. Earlier, the ego. What do you think about the ego? Where does that fit into everything when it comes to the strife on Earth and us personally? And when you undergo these experiences, the ego, is probably screaming like, "Oh my God!"
I think the ego is the only thing that stands in the way between me and God, myself. And I definitely have an ego, but I also work through my meditation mostly, and seeing myself as I am in relationship to God as opposed to seeing myself in relationship to my neighbor keeps it a little quiet for me.
Well, what do you think the ego is exactly, though? I mean, what do you think it is?
I don't think I had an ego when I was dead. I had consciousness, and ego seems to be. I had self. I brought with me all that all the love that I gave away, and all the love that I gathered, and all the pain that I had caused. But in comparison to God, my ego was worthless and had no value if I had it at all over there. Those who practice prayer talk about the ego being you have to have an ego to be a practitioner of prayer, because you have to have the chance to lose your ego in order
so when it comes to, we're talking about God, and what do you think about the dark side, do you think? What are your thoughts on the devil?
I think there's more in the world than we imagine.
So you think they're like creatures of darkness?
I'm sure of it. I'm sure
of it.
Yeah,
there's always these people who say they don't believe in the devil, and I say, well, if you were strapped to a chair and Jeffrey Dahmer was standing over you, he might.
Might convince you otherwise.
Yeah. Or Hannibal Lecter. It comes in many forms.
Well, and the human heart itself has lots of darkness in it. I mean, we justify all sorts of stuff. We just do. All sorts of pain we give to other people, we justify. It just seems to be built that way.
It's funny, Jay, in chat, Jay mentioned Graham Hancock's Magician of the Gods. I have that book, and Graham Hancock, he just wrote a book that's basically saying a giant comet's coming to kill us.
Yeah.
Or something's coming to kill us. But he's pretty reputable, so, I mean, I haven't read the book yet. It's pretty deep. Like, he draws on some pretty deep, ancient, crazy stuff. But, and then everybody's going crazy right now. They've been going crazy about Planet X and Nibiru. That's supposedly like where the Anunnaki live and all that.
There's no proof of any of that stuff.
But
and there's only fear mongering. I mean, what does it matter?
It is, but the scientists have recently they haven't found it, but they've been searching for something they think is a planet that's been tugging on the outer planets like Uranus and Neptune and Pluto.
Absolutely. Yep.
But they haven't seen it, but they have verified recently in like the last year or so that there is a gravitational body out there affecting the orbits of those last 3 or 4 planets. They just don't know exactly where it is, and if they do, it may be a brown dwarf star that's the sister to our planet or to our sun. Our solar system is unique in this galaxy. We're away from many, many other solar systems. We're kind of like a shadow zone, and unlike the other solar systems, we have one sun. Almost every other sun is at least 2, sometimes 3 or 4 stars are orbiting around each other. So we got that uniqueness going for us. But if they find this brown dwarf star, boom, we're just like everybody else.
Right. But for the time being, we don't know what it is, but we do know that it does exist.
Yep. And that's all that we know. We don't know what it is, where it is, what its orbit is exactly, but maybe someday we'll find out. Maybe next year, maybe 10,000 years.
They have been finding some weird shiznizle out there now lately, for sure.
Well, that's because we're developing better and better ways of looking at it.
Better sensors.
Yep, we are.
Oh, sure. Well, I guess my view on it all is I'm not like a complete ancient astronaut nut, but I do believe there's some truth to that. And sometimes I jokingly say aliens came by Earth and did their DNA sperm business and kept on trucking.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And I think that there was another civilization here that they had a fight or a war with, and that's where we get the biblical war with heaven, or the war between heaven and earth, and maybe even the war between heaven and hell. But whatever was here before us, they wiped it out and then made us.
I guess we'll find out as time unfolds.
Yeah, I'm speculating.
During the break, I was reading about the Navosians and Neanderthals and DNA studies in human beings. We're just beginning to unpack that whole record.
Yep.
Any Sasquatch encounters?
No, but enough time in the woods that I would have liked to have had that happen.
I have a book out on Bigfoot, Praise for the Hairy Man. Check it out sometime. It's
all right, I will do that. I do live in the one town, or near the town, where we have the what's it called? Cryptology?
Cryptocon?
Yeah, we have the museum here in Portland, Maine.
I don't know what that. I'm not sure what that. Is it a jury? No, I'm not sure what that is. But
Cryptozoology Museum. It's the Cryptozoology Museum.
Is that Lauren Coleman, I think?
I think that is that right. I think that's the name.
Yeah, Lauren Coleman named my book. Wrote with Andrew Colvin, top 10 of 2013. Yeah, baby.
Nice. Yeah.
But we got about 4 minutes left. Really enjoyed it, man. Your story's very inspiring. You got to write it in your book, and I'm sure it's helped a lot of people, and it's definitely you're giving me goosebumps when you were talking about the communications and stuff, and the way you describe it and everything. I definitely believe you. And as someone myself who's seen a lot of weird stuff, I'm not one to denounce anyone else's experiences, because I know that there's a lot of weird stuff going on because I've seen it. So, but I've definitely appreciated it. And what was your websites again?
PeterPanagore.com and dailydevotions.org. And you can sign up for a daily inspirational email at dailydevotions.org, too.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I wrote that dailydevotions.com down.
Dailydevotions.org and PeterPanagore.com.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me refix that. But yeah, we appreciate it. And you got other books out, or are you planning another book? What's going on?
I have another book called 2 Minutes for God. It's a collection of my TV work up to a certain point, some from several years ago. And yeah, I'm planning another book. I just talked to my agent about it today. Next book will be about the strange experiences that near-death experience creates in a person's life, at least in my life. Lots of weirdity things that are, like, embarrassingly strange.
Definitely. Well, keep me in the loop on that one for sure.
Okay.
All right. We appreciate it. And
I appreciate you
thanks,
guys.
everybody, for listening. Supernatural Substation's coming up next. And I'm going to get into some Daredevil and Punisher. That's right, some superhero madness. That's my like. This is Jeffery Pritchett of the Church